Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just before this episode of the podcast started, I wanted to let you know that I have decided to break this episode up in two parts, primarily because the conversation that I had with Abhishek was so dense and informative. It spanned a range of topics, including partnering with pharma, digital therapeutics, of course, reimbursements, the right way to build a tech in healthcare startup, especially in today's times. So I thought that the best thing to do was to break this up into two parts, and I really hope you have a good time listening to part one of this podcast that's going to start now, and wait around for part two that will come out next week at the time of posting this. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Have a good day.
Hi, Abhishek. Welcome to the Health Tech Narrative podcast. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, where are you speaking to us from?
Hey, Divyam, thank you so much for having me. I'm dialing in from Dubai. So it's been what should be a desert land today has a lot of rain, or at least this week had a lot of rain.
Yes. We've all seen the news and hope you and your family are keeping safe. And I'll start with a fairly open-ended question. There's probably no right way of answering it. Do you think there is a market in India for digital therapeutics?
Short answer is not in the way in which there is a market in some of the reimbursed environments. Genesis of the opinion is coming from being an operator in the space, right? So primary care is essentially digital therapeutics forms part of it, right? It's not meant to be a hospitalization event. It's not meant to be an emergency event. It's not tertiary care. It's not secondary care. It's primary. It is in between two appointments, and thereby the entire digital therapeutic landscape is designed to be a assistive to your existing care pathway on the primary care side. Now, for innovations on primary care to really thrive, you need those innovations to be paid for in some form and capacity. There are two types of payments. One part of payment is, well, the person who does the innovation, there is an upfront cost, and then there's ongoing delivery cost. It's not like you build a drug and then you're done, and then there is no more innovation left, and you're constantly just selling more of the same drug. If digital therapeutics are to be deliver the engagement, deliver the retention, deliver the real world outcomes, they need to be innovated at a localized level. Innovation costs money. That innovation then needs to be reimbursed. When you don't reimburse that innovation, the only other alternative is out of pocket. In out of pocket, when it comes to healthcare, there is, why would a consumer standalone pay for an insulin branded medication? They don't. They pay for it because the doctor prescribes it. The doctor prescribes it because the doctor is medically authorized to do it, has been sold over multiple studies and multiple years. Now, if you look at a digital therapeutic, now the challenge is that first, it's not being sold by pharma yet. I mean, although pharma is sort of adding it into its continuum, at least as a companion to the drug or as a standalone. There's early signs of that in India. But a physician, for them to prescribe it, it still needs to be something that is regulatory approved in the country, which is a gray area. It needs to then be understood by a physician, where guess what? The medical education of the physician never had digital therapeutics, but it had a lot of drugs in there. And then you basically, therefore, don't have it. Where do I fit it in? There isn't robust clinical trial data to be able to demonstrate the digital therapeutic efficacy and effectiveness. And last but not least, it's not a prescribe and done. There is continual monitoring. The physician has a role to play. So if a physician has a role to play, and it's not necessarily coming through the physician pathway, then the physician is at conflict. There are two really important things of India which make India super affordable, but also make India really complex for anyone else, right? We do not today reimburse primary care. None of primary care. We don't reimburse the consultation. We don't reimburse the diagnostic. We don't reimburse the drug. So firstly, who's paying? If the consumer is paying, but the physician has a critical role to play because these digital therapeutics are more often than not meant for complex conditions, then what's going on, right? Because in traditionally anything that the patient touches has gone through the physician, and anything that the patient touches which has not gone through the physician, the patient still asks the doctor about, well, is this good or is this not good? And the second part of it, which is even more complex, is that asynchronous care, or the time between two appointments, is generally not considered as part of the care pathway in India. The care pathway is episodic. You show up at the doctor's door. He visits you for 5-10 minutes. You have a consultation, and the patient is meant to be consulted 3 months later. The entire time in between, the only thing that is really given some sanity check of adherence is pop a pill, or take your inhaler dose, or do an injectable, which is part of the prescription. So we've got a lot of things in India that don't necessarily make India ready for digital therapeutics at scale, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a role to play. So, we are 1.4 billion people. Does India have a market for 1.4 million patients on digital therapeutics? Absolutely. Does it have the potential to go to 14 million? Absolutely. But is it really a scaled item in India? It's going to take a long, long time for a whole host of reasons.
You touched upon behavior, right? Understanding patient behavior is very important. I just wanted to understand from your perspective as an entrepreneur and someone who's wanting to deliver such kind of, in-between care. What was your approach to decision making from the perspective of, creating a catalog of behaviors in relation to a particular chronic disease based on which you could tailor a solution under the banner of a digital therapeutic?
Sure. Again, great question. And it leads me to maybe two two endpoints, same answer. So the approach has been really simple. It's there are a bunch of, let's call them signals that you get, right? Signals are social determinant of health data, patient-reported data, EMR data, if accessible, medical history data, your connected device data, wearable data, and then all the data that comes, while you're consistently using the phone, including interactions on the app, chatting, the sentiment data that comes through the conversations, both voice as well as chat. So you're getting a ton of data, right? Now that data, we were driving it through, when we started a fancy if-else logic system, and then it got more complicated, and then had the LLMs power it eventually, with respect to being able to see that data in a de-identified manner and have it supervised with first paramedicals and then eventually doctors, so that you're always making sense of that. And then because we were filtering that data through the lens of the primary condition you had and the comorbidities you had, we had the care pathways, the clinical protocols, looking in to be able to ensure that that sort of thing was followed. So that gave us clean care pathways, clean protocols, clean data, and a clean sense of the behavioral profile, the psychological profile, the clinical profile, and the overall, let's say, well-being profile of a patient, which was dynamically changing as we found out more information. So at its core, getting that information, for lack of a better word, a digital twin, is super important, because without that, you're never going to be able to personalize the treatment. And it's not the same as a digital twin in the genetic testing world, which is like a true digital twin. This is the version that is necessary so that the personalization of that treatment was possible. When we start any therapeutic area, so we did many, many, many therapeutic areas, right? There was already a baseline of incredible information available, but we did it through this lens. So it had to be personalized. It had to drive cost savings. It had to improve a pain point that mattered to the patient. It had to improve a clinical metric or two that mattered to a doctor. There had to be a way in which to continuously monitor that through the journey, because we don't want to be guessing that 3 months later you come back and whoops, nothing's moved, right? But now if you go through that, then what happened is the universe of, we call it mechanism of actions. They were limited. We weren't going after everyone, right? So for us, it was behavioral mechanism of action, diet and nutrition mechanism of action, sleep, activity, education and confidence building, adherence, of course, so medication adherence, drug titration, all was there. And then within each mechanism of action, there was sub one. So for example, within diet, is this better off going through the keto pathway? Is this better off going through a low carb pathway? From a behavioral perspective, is this better off going through cognitive behavioral therapy? Is this better off going through acceptance and commitment therapy? Right. So what happens is that science was already there to be able to figure out the rest. We created digital therapies which were multi-MOA cocktail over multi-weeks, depending upon what an outcome we wanted. And then once those were done, they were retrospectively tested with the digital twins that we knew, so were already there through our previous research. So if I know the digital signals I'm capturing, I know the digital twin that is going to be needed to drive personalization, I know through my previous, attempts at digital therapy, what magic moments need to be created to drive engagement, to drive retention, to drive outcomes. So you had enough data between the clinical science, between what research we were doing at the top, the digital twin, and our retrospective data of human behavior, to be able to take an attempt at a first cut. And the beautiful part of building digital, let's say, anything, is the power of iteration, right? All of this just helps you get to version 1. Everything else after that, you better have the world's best iteration model. Because honestly, what got Wellthy to succeed wasn't all of this stuff. It was the true belief that the company and the product can get only as good as how quickly we can iterate. If I iterate once a year versus I iterate once a week, then I'm just going to do better over a compounding period of time. I may have an okay product when I launch, but over a year, 52 iterations later, life can get pretty amazing. That led to, always a triple goal: clinical outcomes, delight and quality of life for the patient. Because, I can tell you with complete conviction, 99% of patients do not give a shit about their cardiovascular risk score or their HbA1c score or any of. They don't care. They care about the fact that I feel lighter, I feel more energetic, I'm able to sleep better. The feel matters more than anything else. In general, the metric itself doesn't matter, the feel matters. The metric matters to the clinician. So the clinical outcomes, the feel, and then the last piece is cost savings. Because at the core, you do all of this, who's paying? If the consumer is paying, find a way that this actually results in financial savings for the consumer. If the insurer is paying, make sure this results in lesser hospitalization. And that's sort of how we close the loop. So this was our playbook, and it's nothing, there's no rocket science to it. The core is in the execution.
If we fast forward to February 2024, and around that time we got news that there's been an acquisition of Wellthy by TruDoc. Now, partnerships are key in healthcare. So what does this acquisition mean in terms of the impact that can be created and the markets that you want to serve?
So you always, as a founder, have a wish list of what ifs, right? So I had two big what ifs. One was, if only I could get the doctor to prescribe, so that I, as the in-between provider, can do a better job. Number one, right? Two is, if only I could, show to somebody that mattered that this actually results in cost saving significantly. Instinctively, because of those what ifs, the right go-to-market partners are the people that filled that gap, which is insurers, because they are the only people that can truly understand the cost savings, because not all cost savings are felt in day one or day 30, right? Some of these cost savings takes 2-3 years to be able to demonstrate. And the second is, telemedicine or primary care companies who get deeply integrated into this workflow, so that the physician, where all of this begins, is also sort of participating in this journey and it's a part of their care pathway, right? I think the TruDoc just happened to solve both. They not only were a primary care provider, their majority of their business is working with insurers and driving cost savings and delivering the benefits that virtual care delivers. The jigsaw puzzles fit really well. That they solve for the episodes in between of the actual encounters and the appointments. We solve for the time in between. They are pushing for cost savings for the insurer. We amplify those cost savings for the insurer. And it helped that there were several playbooks of this already created. And as a founder, I had to always be in that place where I do right by my patients, my shareholders, and do the right thing. If the what ifs could be solved, and the promise of delivering world-class care, better outcomes, better cost savings with a integrated physician care pathway is possible, that's worthwhile giving it a good shot.
If you had to pick between these two larger impediments to adopting DTX, would you say it's the legal framework within which a DTX works, or is it the requirement that it needs more evidence? Because these are the two chief criticisms of a digital therapeutic company, and we have examples for both. There are researchers who said that evidence is something that's lacking. You can't just have a clinical trial with the number that you just used, like 42 or 43. You can't just have a clinical trial with that and prove that your product works. And then again, you have the example of something like a peer therapeutics, right, where they were trying to argue that their product should be a durable medical equipment. That was, I think, denied to them. I think a year later, what happened to them happened to them. So, between these two, which one would you say that is the challenge that needs to be solved for higher adoption, or is there some other impediment?
I'd say both of these are impediments, but I firmly believe that a digital therapeutic, yes, you can argue it's a medical device, but each of these medical devices are augmented with humans, right? So whichever person creates a digital therapy, barring very few, that digital therapy, if it is augmented with a coach, will do a better job than standalone software, firstly. So I see it more as a combination of software and service, not necessarily only software. If that is the case, then why should it be reimbursed like a medical device? It should be reimbursed like a service. Like, let's take an example of the US, right? There are CPT codes for service. Remote monitoring case, there is a CPT code. There's a CPT code for remote condition management. Why is this any different? So if you're going to argue that because mine is a digital therapeutic, reimburse me for $5,000 versus the CPT code is, for remote condition management is $200. So I would first say, let's get real. This is a service. So this is a software plus service. Yes, it can be called a digital therapy. It doesn't take away from the fact that it is, right? So if we go down that, and I'm just saying if, right? There is enough evidence to suggest that there are maybe 10% of the digital therapeutics out there are true standalone prescription digital therapeutics, but then they need to go through the $50-100 million of investment necessary to classify as a drug, right? So you don't get to suddenly say, I am a digital therapeutic. I should be given a free pass, collect $200 and go past the monopoly board. Right? It doesn't work like that. If you want to be reimbursed like a drug or a medical device, like wear your big boy pants and do exactly what a drug or a medical device does, which is you've got to do the clinical trials, you've got to do the evidence building, and then after that, you have to build the trust building with the physician. There's no other way to really go out and do it, right? So pharma companies and medical device companies have figured it out. So if you truly want to be on the prescription side, then behave like any other prescription product does. If you want to be on the non-prescription side, then there's a lot you can do. But then why are you asking for prescription reimbursement? So yes, legal framework matters. If the doctor is going to prescribe your drug and put it on that prescription, then the doctor is legally liable for what he or she writes over there. So you can't just like say, oh, you do it over there and get on. Yeah, India is just a little lax country. It's okay. It's great for innovation. Doesn't change the fact that you need that legal sort of framework. An example, the UAE and Saudi, telemedicine and primary care are exactly the same from a legal footprint. Because of that, you have an opportunity to thrive in these markets. In India, all said and done, telemedicine and primary care are not on the same footprint. You cannot, there are so many caveats of what can't be done on telemedicine, because of which nobody's really going to give it the time and attention it deserves. Innovation is not going to happen in that to the extent it can. Outcomes are never going to happen. So telemedicine is going to be the side act for a long time until you actually give it that legal footprint. Innovation just cannot thrive because there are 5 reasons why you will be shut down or you will always be pushed back, right? And I truly believe at some point it needs to make economic sense. And this is why at least we made the move, right? We saw that we, as a digital therapeutic, you have to go direct to consumer, explain the value proposition and get the money out of the consumer. If I want the money out of the insurer, and to this extent, public health also matters. So when we do talk about the NHA, the same sort of playbook matters, right? Yeah. You're going to have to play by the rules where the 15,000 other people have also got their reimbursement from the same insurer. What is the argument? The argument is cost savings. So for example, with Wellthy, we showed over a little south of 100,000 patients in India that when a digital therapeutic is embedded with an insurance plan, over a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year period, it results in X% reduction in hospitalizations, Y% reduction in the severity of the hospitalization. All of these metrics, without these metrics, you can't scale.
Yeah, perfect.
Hey, so part 2 of this episode is going to come around next week. So if it actually has already been a week since part 1 came out, I hope you hit play on the next one. If not, do stick around and wait for a week. I promise it'll be worth your while. And whichever part of the world you're in, I hope you have a good day and thank you for being a listener of the Health Tech Narrative podcast.